Now will we see the magic?
All right, where's Murray? Okay, who is it?
This is Jesus, kid.
Know then that it is the year 10,191.
Yes, we are bored. We're all bored now.
Hi, good night.
Good night.
Hello, and welcome to Mary vs. the Movies with your hosts, Mary Jones and
Dennis Ling.
And I am not at all anybody important, but it's been a year in quarantine and there is nothing to do. So what are we doing? We are going through all these movies from the 1980s that I have never seen, and we're going to watch them. And I'm going to first describe what I think this movie is, having never seen it. And then we're going to watch the movie, off mic, and then come back and discuss the movie. And what did I get right? What did I get wrong? Was this worth watching? Were the movies of the 1980s a really good decade for movies? I think probably so. Anyway, hi. This is our first episode.
Yep.
And yeah, go ahead.
So this started from a Best Show.
Yes.
Tom Sharpling.
Yes, if you're a fan of the Best Show with Tom Sharpling, you may have listened to an episode from March of 2021 where the topic was, it was fill in the blank, and the idea was you've never seen a thing, so you're going to describe what you think it's about. And I called in and I talked about having never seen Lethal Weapon or Highlander, and I tried to describe what I thought the movies were, and I got Lethal Weapon kind of right, and I think I got Highlander very wrong. Yeah. I've yet to see either film.
There's not a lot to Lethal Weapon.
The point being, we're going to go through the movies of the 1980s. Now, why the 1980s? Well, I was born in 1979, and so I was a child in the 80s, and Dennis was born in...
Before.
Yes. Quite a bit before. And so he actually remembers a lot of these films. Not all of them. There's a number of films we're going to watch that he's never seen, but he remembers a lot of the films that I never saw because I would be like 6 at the time, and I just never got around to watching them. Now, I grew up in Philadelphia for the most part until at one point my mother got a new job and we moved out to like almost like PA Dutch country. But when I lived in Philadelphia, I was catty-cornered to a little independent movie rental place. And so I didn't grow up with a whole lot of books or records in the house, but we had a lot of movies and we rented a lot of movies. My mom loves film, and she raised me to love film. My mom and my dad both would take us to the movies all the time. So I grew up watching a lot of movies. So I watched a lot of kids' movies in the 80s. I watched a lot of movies from, say, like the 30s and the 40s. I grew up on like classic films that were old when my mother saw them, but I didn't watch a lot of contemporary films in the 80s if they were considered too much for kids. Although there were like weird exceptions. Like for some reason I got to watch Good Morning Vietnam when I was 8, I guess, 8 or 9.
It's Mark.
Well, it is Mark. Yeah, that's a whole I won't even get into like the Robin Williams thing, but like I was a big Robin Williams fan when I was probably too young to be a Robin Williams fan. But maybe that's not that strange. I don't know. Yeah. There's probably a lot of people who are like around my age, late 30s, early 40s, who, kind of fall into the same category. But anyway, so there's like a lot of films that I've just never seen. And so we've made a list of at least 120, and I'm sure the list will expand. And it'll be, honestly, it's everything from tonight's feature, which is 9 to 5, to Nightmare on Elm Street, to Empire of the Sun, which I can't seem to keep straight between that and The Last Emperor. So we're going to do that head-to-head, just like I can't keep straight, The Last Starfighter and Starman. I don't remember which is which, because I've never seen either of them. There's a lot of films from the 80s that I've just never seen. I've never seen Friday the 13th, and I've never seen...
Hell Comes to Frogtown.
I've never... Yeah, that's true. I've never seen Hell Comes to Frogtown.
But you will.
But we will. Come hell or high water, we will find Hell Comes to Frogtown. I just figured let's keep it to one particular decade, because you could go through, how many movies have you seen from the 20s? I've seen a surprising number, but, not everything. But we're not going to do that. We're just going to stick to the 1980s for now. The 1980s are an interesting time period for film. you went through the, American New Wave and the birth of the blockbuster. So you have kind of that, that changed American cinema, but you don't yet have the indie renaissance coming along just yet. So it's this weird in between time of film, but there's a lot of variety in there. Movies of the 80s are kind of all over the place, and I think it's an interesting time period. And I think the 1980s are, part of it's obviously just nostalgia just because of my age, and I was a child at the time, but I also think there's some interesting things to be said about the 1980s and the films of the time period, and what did I see, what did I not see. That's just a springboard for talking about stuff. So, having said all that, tonight's should I go get my drum kit? Yeah, it's a great song. Tonight's topic is 9 to 5, starring Dolly Parton, Lily Tomlin, Jane Fonda, I think, and Dabney Coleman. Now, I've never seen this film, although I have heard the song many times. My knowledge of it... So here's what I think is in this movie. Because, again, I've never seen this movie. All I have is vague recollections of... honest to God, I don't even know... I don't think I even know promos. I just think of, vague, stills in the back of my head, film stills. Dolly Parton, Lily Tomlin, and Jane Fonda are all women who work in offices, and I have a feeling they all have to work for Dabney Coleman in some respect. And Dabney Coleman is an extremely bad boss. I have a feeling there's just wall-to-wall sexual harassment the whole time, because anything I've ever seen Dabney Coleman in, he has been a villain. And pretty much all I've seen Dabney Coleman in, I think, is Boardwalk Empire, big-time villain. Muppets Take Manhattan. I'm pretty sure he's a villain. Tootsie. I remember him being kind of a sexually harassing director.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm sure I've seen him in other things, but I can't remember.
War Games.
War Games. Right.
He's not really a villain there. He's just an antagonist.
Well, the whole, military-industrial complex is the villain in War Games. And as a member of that, I think we could slot him under villain. So, the point being, as far as I can tell, it's 3 women goes up against their evil male boss, which feels pretty timely in the era of Me Too. All I know, seriously, all I know about this movie is at some point Lily Tomlin is dressed like Snow White, and I don't know if this is some sort of kinky cosplay or a fantasy, or I don't know what's going on. I don't know why she's dressed like Snow White. That's literally all I know about this movie, is at some point Lily Tomlin is in cosplay, and that's it. That's all I know. That and the theme song. So I assume at some point the women come together and overthrow their bosses, and a socialist utopia is established. Maybe?
Oh. So it's a blonde and a brunette and a black-haired lead female. So it's basically
Powerpuff Girls!
Yeah.
Oh my God! They're the Powerpuff Girls, and they're going to take down the mayor.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's awesome!
But so, isn't there going to be a reboot of Powerpuff Girls?
Yes,
with,
and they're going to
adults?
make it sad,
Yes.
and I don't want to see
It's
that.
so dumb.
I
But-
don't want to see sad Powerpuff Girls. I just want to see them kicking ass.
So basically 9 to 5 is what we should be getting, but that's not what we're getting.
Right. Awesome. Oh my God. Now I'm actually even more excited. It's the Powerpuff Girls versus the mayor of town, and they kick his ass. Yes. Let's go watch the movie. As a wiser man than me once said, workers of the world unite. You have nothing to lose but your chains. Anyway, 9 to 5.
There were chains.
There were chains. There were actually chains involved. Wow, imagine a world where Reagan was never elected. And maybe you would get the end of that movie.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me first say, boy, there's some plot twists in this that I was not expecting.
I'm proud of myself for not revealing anything.
Thank you, because this goes some places that, again, totally had no idea this was going to happen. very briefly, the plot is Jane Fonda starts working at Consolidated what is it? Consolidated?
I think it's just called Consolidated.
Consolidated Company. I want to call it Consolidated Cardboard, but again, that's a Best Show thing. Okay, but it is called Consolidated something. Film starts. I guess it takes place in L.A., but it could be any city. They never say, but you can tell it's Los Angeles just because of the architecture and the mountains in the background. But they don't ever say what city it's in. And that opening sequence with like everybody walking to work, that looks more like New York, but it's not New York that they're in. Jane Fonda is newly divorced. She goes to work for a company where Lily Tomlin has been there for a long time, and she should be far more advanced in her position than she is because she's a woman. They're both working for Dabney Coleman, and his secretary is Dolly Parton. Everybody thinks that Dolly Parton is sleeping with him, but she is not. They're just being kind of cruel and gossiping about her because of her appearance. And because he's spreading rumors about her. It's really terrible. The three of them get to know each other and realize that they're all on the same side because they're all frustrated by their positions. They plot against Dabney Coleman, not just because he is a sexist bigot, but because he's made the working conditions just terrible. Because they're doing things like you can't have personal objects out on your desk. They're in like an open office planning situation. So it's not like you're in cubicles or anything. You're not in offices. Everybody's desk is up against each other. There's definitely an air of conformity in the office. You're not allowed to discuss things like how much you're being paid.
I'm glad that's changed since then.
Well, oh no, but so that's the thing. Like watching this movie, it's really both. It was eerie, but also incredibly disheartening at how relevant this movie still is.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I mean, if you're talking about the sexual harassment issue, if you're talking about the pay disparity, if you're talking about issues about job sharing and childcare and work-life balance. I mean, the song, 9 to 5, the whole point is that it's sucking your life away. By the way, just as an aside, I don't know anybody who works 9 to 5 insofar as everybody has to actually work, at least a half hour more because you don't get paid for lunch. I mean, maybe there are people out there who get to have a paid lunch because they're salaried, so technically they're getting paid, but I don't know anybody who doesn't work at least 40 hours a week. If you are, I mean, let me change that. Obviously there are different situations where, say, you work in retail, you work in, there can be different office situations. When I was working at the library, I did not work 40 hours a week. I worked 35. And so, but my point being, this movie is still unbelievably relevant to a degree that is kind of depressing.
Yeah.
Like, it's a very funny movie, and they are the leads are all fantastic in it. I absolutely love them. I'm really depressed at how little progress has made. In fact, any progress that was made has been rolled back over the past 40 years. They realize they're all on the same side, and they decide to unwind by going to a bar. Lily Tomlin, turns out she's got a joint on her, so they go back to, I guess, her house.
To Doreen's.
Was it Doreen's house or
Yeah.
was it her? Okay, it was Doreen's house.
Because her husband was playing.
Right, he was out. Doreen is Dolly Parton.
Yeah.
So they go back to Dolly Parton's house, and they sit around getting high and discussing like the ways that they would get revenge. And you get these 3 wonderful fantasy sequences. Jane Fonda basically hunts him down in...
it's like a jungle thing.
Okay, so yeah, basically he's being hunted through the office by an angry mob, and then she shoots him down. Although I like the fact that like they desaturate the color in that scene because it it's harkening back to basically adventure movies. Although I was also thinking about the fact that her dad was Henry Fonda, so he was always playing guys like Wyatt Earp and stuff. So the fact that they desaturate the color, it makes it look like a black and white movie almost. And I think it's harkening back to
And I like the fact they set it up when she sees the deer head.
Yes.
In the office in the beginning.
This is a movie that does a really good job with foreshadowing.
Yeah.
And with setting up a concept and following it through. So that's Jane Fonda's fantasy, is that she shoots him down in the office. Dolly Parton's fantasy is that basically she turns the tables on him and starts sexually harassing him. Although you never get the sense that she actually wants to follow through. It's more of a revenge thing. And in the end, hogties him. To basically make him stop doing what he's doing. Lily Tomlin has a fantasy where she's a Disney princess with animal helpers who are basically animated kind of like the animals in Robin Hood.
I guess you saw a picture or something.
I must have seen a picture.
Or maybe like a advertisement showing her in the
Snow
outfit.
White. Yeah. And so that's all I knew. So I did not know that this was a revenge fantasy of hers.
Yeah.
It's great. The animation in it is really nice, actually. It's rather well done.
I like that you see, like, I guess it's the rabbit that's knitting the whole time. It turns out he's like knitting like an R.I.P.
Oh, and do you know what that is? Do you know
What's
what?
that?
You know what the referencing is actually? Madame Defarge from A Tale of Two Cities,
Oh, okay.
where she spends the whole book knitting basically the coats of arms of all the aristocrats that she wants to assassinate.
Oh, okay.
So she has this fantasy where she poisons Dabney Coleman.
And everyone is freed from their chains. And
Everyone is freed from their
is that great?
chains. Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that then you have this image of all these workers chained in a basement, and it's a bit like the concept of the storming of the Bastille. The next day, Dabney Coleman is demanding coffee from Lily Tomlin, and she's very tired, and she accidentally confuses what's essentially a artificial sweetener with rat poison, and she accidentally poisons him, just like in her fantasy. Except, luckily, he never actually drinks the poison. He's been having problems with this chair, and the chair falls over, and he hits his head, and he has to go to the hospital. She thinks she's accidentally killed him. There's an entire sequence of the film where they rush off to the hospital, chasing after him, and they assume that he's been killed accidentally, and they try to like steal the body back, and that came completely out of the blue for me. I had no idea there would be an entire body snatching sequence.
I kind of forgot that part, too.
Eventually they figure out that, oh, that's not his body. He comes back to the office, and he knows what's been going on because he has a snitch.
Yeah.
So the snitch had listened to them talking about, oh my God, okay, so he's not actually dead. You know, what happens now, blah, blah, blah. She goes and tells him
I
everything.
like that I guess she went and typed everything she wrote on the
So
toilet
she's
paper.
she's hiding in a toilet stall and writing everything out on toilet paper, and then goes types it up and tells him what happened. You have to admire her work ethic. So he knows what's going on, and he's going to blackmail Dolly Parton's character into having sex with him. And she gets so angry and upset with him that she just flips out, pulls the phone cord out of the wall.
That's right, he was going to call the cops.
He was going to call the cops
She,
because she won't sleep with him. And so she hog ties him, just like in her fantasy. And now it's just like, oh no, what do I do? And the other two women, because this is the end of the day on a Friday, and the other two women come in and they're like, okay, well, how do we get out of this? And I guess, what was it? He tries to get loose. He gets loose.
He because Jane Fonda is like the nice one.
Yeah.
He says like, oh, this is hurting me, and she's like, oh, and she loosens.
She loosens it. That's right.
Yeah.
And so then now he's free, and he's gonna run off. And so she pulls Dolly Parton's gun out of her purse and shoots at him.
Yeah.
Which, just like in her fantasy. So each fantasy comes true in a way that is increasingly more disastrous for them. And they hatch a plan where essentially they take him hostage in his own house for about a month.
Yeah.
In the meantime, Lily Tomlin uncovers that as far as she can tell, he's been embezzling money from the company. So she comes up with this whole scheme where as long as we can keep him under wraps, tied up, we will expose the embezzling, and then we'll be free of him. And you see like just a series of vignettes of them holding him hostage and trying to keep everything under control. And in the meantime, while they're trying to figure out how to get rid of him legally, they start realizing, hey, we all of a sudden have power not just over him, but over our own jobs. Because we've been covering, as far as anyone knows, he's still there as boss. And Dolly Parton's character, she knows how to, forge his signature because she does it all the time for him with his permission. All of a sudden, they start coming up with policies for the workers that they actually want and need. They start coming up with things like salary transparency, equal pay for equal work, daycare at the company, job sharing, flex hours.
They paint everything like it has this.
They repaint everything so that it's not this boring like white beige color.
You know what? I don't think you even see that till the very end.
No, you don't see it till the end. But what's nice is the way that they film it is, earlier in the movie there was this whole thing that goes where like you can't have any personal items on our desk. All of a sudden, every desk is covered with personal items, photos, knickknacks, whatever. There is one character who spends most of the movie, dealing with alcoholism, and at the very end of the movie, she's been offered, treatment paid for by the company, a wellness program essentially. So they start implementing all of these really worker-friendly policies to make life livable.
Well, what I like about it, it's like pretty much everything that happens in the movie has some kind of resolution. Like,
yes.
There's nothing kind of wasted in it.
It's a tightly constructed film. It's surprisingly well constructed.
It definitely feels like a 30s type of...
We're getting to that. We're getting to that. So the resolution is turns out they can't get him on embezzling because he gets free at the last minute. Basically because his wife comes home from her very long trip in the South Seas. And he gets free and has been holding Jane Fonda kind of hostage for the weekend.
No, what happens is he gets free and sends her on another trip.
Oh, that's,
and then pretends to be...
That's right. He's pretending to... Yeah.
And that's a clever thing that I didn't notice. I didn't realize when I saw it before because I was a kid and
sure.
I'm just like, oh, Dolly Parton.
Yeah.
But like,
fair enough.
But it is kind of clever in how they do it in that he's actually free for 3 days.
Yeah. But
they don't really show anything. They don't show him doing anything. But it turns out that he
spends
spoils their plan of blackmail.
He spoils their whole plan of proving that he's been embezzling, and the mechanics of that particular subplot isn't really important for understanding the film. But the point is that he thinks he's got them, and so he comes back to the office ready to just undo everything and have them locked up. At which point, in a Deus Ex Machina, if you will, the chairman of the board shows up and says, "The company's doing great. You've improved us like immensely."
Yeah, King Richard returns from
exactly
the Crusades.
That's exactly it. King Richard returns from the Crusades, etc. This is was it like Measure for Measure or whatever, where the king finally reveals himself. Sterling Hayden dressed like, I don't know, Colonel Sanders or whatever. Yeah. Yeah. He strides in and says, these policies are great. Our productivity is great. Our employees are happy. And that's great. We're going to promote you. We're going to send you to Brazil for our operations down there to change things. So essentially, the point of the film is when you collectively work together, you can create better working conditions.
So this was essentially a movie made for Mary Jones.
It was a movie made for me, man. Yes, collective action works.
Yeah. And they actually mentioned unions early. I didn't remember.
Oh, yeah. Early on, there's a whole thing where the office snitch is telling, one of the characters, now don't try to, fall for any talk about unions and things like that. Yeah, there's.
Yeah, that's kind of the only thing that's brought up in the movie and it never really mentioned again, although it's.
Yeah, so they don't really go into, the mechanics of forming or joining a union, but the ultimate concept of when you work together, because you have a common goal and common needs, you can actually affect change. Now, granted, they did that by taking their boss hostage and forging his name to documents. But, look, man, desperate times.
Yeah.
So, yeah, what sucks? This is still relevant. This movie was made in 1980. That's the same year that Reagan was elected. With the ascension of Reaganomics. And, in the UK it was Thatcher, but it's the same idea of a type of individualism where you red in tooth and claw. It's been terrible. Working standards, living standards have fallen precipitously in the meantime. And yeah, we're kind of back to square one in a lot of ways. Fun movie, though.
Yeah. So you actually stood up during the one line.
Which one?
Because we've heard this before where... where Lily Tomlin's character, she's been there 12 years. She's should get the promotion, and they give it to Bob, who as Dabney Coleman says, well, he has a family to support.
Oh yes.
Oh.
Yeah, I just blew out GarageBand
Sorry about that.
by yelling. Yeah, there is a great sequence where Tomlin basically is passed over for a promotion and a raise because her competition, who hasn't been there as long as she has or has anywhere near as much experience, but he's got a family to support.
Yeah.
She's got 4 kids and is a widow.
Yeah.
Okay, my mother had this exact same situation happen to her probably around the time the film was made. She's a nurse. She's retired now, but she's a nurse. And she went through this whole thing where she had, she was already like a registered nurse and all blah, blah, blah. And a guy who was a technician was getting promoted. And she went to the doctor, because this was like a small practice. She said to the doctor, like, yo, what's up with this? I've been here, blah, blah, blah. We've got plenty of women who are, ahead of him. And he's like, yeah, but, he's got a family. He's got a wife and kids. And she's looking at him like, what the hell do you think I got? Cats? So yes, I heard that line and I went, oh my God, my mother lived this.
Yeah.
And I'm sure more than once.
In fact, we told her we were watching it today, and
Yeah.
she was like, "You haven't seen it?"
And yeah.
I'm sure while she was watching it, she just folded her arms. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a little surprised that I never saw this when I was younger, except for the fact that, Dabney Coleman does spend about a third of the film in bondage gear, which is how they have him tied up. It's very funny. Like, they don't explain that it's bondage gear until, like, the end, because I don't think the characters are conscious that it is, but it is. So, yeah, 9 to 5, man, 2 thumbs up. Yeah. Total recommend. I would, go watch it. It's a very funny film, and I think it's an early example of something you saw in the 1980s, where there was sort of a revival of 1930s style of socially conscious farces. Other examples would be things like Coming to America and Trading Places. Are 2 good examples. What is it? Double Trouble, is it called, with Lily Tomlin and Bette Midler, where they play twins who are also another set of twins, and we watched this.
That,
we watched that, where it's basically a take on a Shakespearean play, but it's 2 sets of twins, and the rich set of twins are trying to basically shut down the factory of the other sets of twins. And
how would you compare this to Working Girl?
Oh, well, so now that's interesting. So, okay, 2 things. Working Girl is in a way the opposite of this. Working Girl is a good movie. Working Girl is very much the striving of an individual. The whole point of that movie is that she overcomes Sigourney Weaver. It's a completely different thing. The whole point of this movie is people working together to make a better workplace for the entire company. Working Girl is about one woman
taking down another woman, really.
Taking down another woman, and it's really all about her getting her own way and her own goals, her own wealth, her own success. It's kind of the opposite. Working Girl is a girl boss movie. I like the message of 9 to 5 a lot more.
Yeah, I think the only wrong note for me is Jane Fonda getting married to a Xerox salesman.
Oh, yeah. That's, the end of the movie, they do like one of those little, this happened to this character and this happened to that character.
That felt like just like, oh, and we'll just make a joke for this,
Yeah. And that's like those sorts of, that was just kind of a trope held over, I guess, from the 70s. Mm-hmm. I remember they do it in American Graffiti. They do it in Animal House. Here's what happened to the characters once the movie ends.
Yeah, but it like after like it's such a well written movie.
Yeah,
and it's like oh okay, we'll throw this trope in at the end.
So yeah, this is very much a farce in the 30s. Okay, so if this was made in the 1930s, mm-hmm. If I was casting it in the 30s, because it has that kind of a feel. Lily Tomlin would be what did I say? Barbara Stanwyck?
Yeah. Stanny.
Yeah. And Dolly Parton, maybe Jean Harlow. Jean Harlow's not country as her, but she's got definitely the whole, you think I'm a dumb blonde, but,
What about like Ginger Rogers or something?
Well, Ginger Rogers is a little harder edge.
Okay.
Jane Fonda character,
She's kind of square.
She's a bit square.
You know what? I bet they would have cast Betty Davis.
Early Betty Davis.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that.
They kind of have
Yeah.
her square, like, because they didn't know what to do with her.
Right.
So-
Yeah, that's true. They really didn't at the time. So yeah, I could see like a young Betty Davis, not young, but earlier in her career than a lot of the later stuff. All About Eve's. So yeah, that's
So who would be Dabney Coleman? So you know the 30s better than me.
That's
so.
that's an interesting question. Who who is kind of a slimy brute in 30s film? Yeah, that's something I gotta think about. Like, and what's good about it is like there's nothing really charming about him. You'd never think, well, is he that bad? No, he's always bad in this. So yeah, it's a pretty good question. I'm not sure who. Anyway, yes, 9 to 5, would recommend.
Yeah, it does not end with Dabney becoming, recognizing the error of his ways.
No, that's actually kind of refreshing. Like
Yeah.
he gets sent off to Brazil, and they mean it as a promotion. It's not.
Yeah.
He doesn't know what he's doing, and he gets like kidnapped or something, and he's gone.
Yeah.
And you know what? Fine. That's appropriate. So, anyway, that's our first episode.
Yep.
And I think next episode we had done a poll about what movies to watch, and second place was Predator. So I think that's going to be our next one.
Cool.
Sound good?
Yep.
All right. Well, until next time. Bye.
See ya.